In today's show, we're talking Summer League with Dan Titus from Yahoo Sports. We're going to talk about a few of the things that we saw while we were there in Las Vegas. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. As I said, we're talking Summer League. We're going to cut into, that's not the right word. We're going to cover, that's better. We're going to cover some of the things that we saw while we were there at the Thomas and Mack Center and the Cox Pavilion. Things we saw across Summer League, and to do that, I am joined by, and I shortchanged him a little bit at the start. I said that he was from Yahoo Sports. He is from Yahoo Sports, but somehow he's now also the host of the Round Ball Stew Fantasy Basketball Podcast. It is the big fella, Dan Titus. Now, welcome in. We're actually here. Josh? Good. After our full start before, we're ready to go. We're here, and you were here. And when I arrived at Summer League that first day on Friday, you were the very first person that I saw. I was doing a ticket giveaway. There's some extra tickets, and I was supposed to meet someone out there. And I see someone from a distance, coming up to me. Guys, is this the guy I'm giving the tickets to? I couldn't see from far away. Say, Josh Lloyd. Yes, hey, it's Dan. And then that was it. And then we saw each other. We met in person for the first time. And Dan, I'll ask you to start this off. How was your experience at Las Vegas Summer League? First time there, media credentialed. How did you find that experience of being there?
It was an extraordinary experience, and I'll be honest, man, like running into you within the first 5 minutes of me walking up Thomas and Mack was like crucial, because for those that don't know, Josh is very plugged in this industry, and not only just fantasy basketball, but basketball as a whole. So I think it was great just being able to shadow you a little bit, get to meet some other of the Locked On guys. I think that was a really good experience because you got to hear some of those rumors that were kind of floating around certain situations regarding Houston and Portland. But then I would say just the access in general to players, man. Like, I mean, how many times were we stand there and then the next group of guys are about to play, it's Wemby on one side and Brandon Miller on the other on opening night. Getting to see Victor Wembanyama in person, my God, Taco Fall's a big man, but like Victor Wembanyama's not too far behind him. So it was just great getting a chance to talk to players, talk to those that are closest to the league, and really kind of set this up. Set up the stage for, how we're going to evaluate some of these rookies, these second, third-year players going into next fantasy basketball season.
We were down there in the media section watching the Portland-Houston game, and I was standing next to Dan. I look over, and all of a sudden, he's just talking to Jalen Green. Like, what's going on here? I'm not good enough, so you got to talk to Jalen, have a bit of a chat to him. But that's what it was like. We're just there. There's just people everywhere, and you get little bits and pieces of information all the way that you're through there. Now, that stuff can always change, but we're going to cover one of those things in particular a couple of those things that we spoke about with people in the know while we're at Summer League. But I asked you before we came on here, Dan, to give me 3 big takeaways that you found from being at Las Vegas Summer League, and you're going to hit us with this first one right now. Is it hot? I don't know. Is it scorching? Is it mild? How many Scoville units would you say this one gives us, Dan? Because we're talking about Chet Holmgren. Is he similar, equal, equivalent to Victor Wembanyama? Is that what you're going with?
That's where I'm going with. I just think that he comes at a cheaper cost, though. As I was doing my first rankings, I have Wembanyama around 37, and right now I have Chet penciled in at like 50, 51. I think there's a very good chance that they're going to be pretty comparable fantasy assets. I do think that there's a little bit of an edge to Victor in terms of scoring, but it's the blocks that's really going to separate these guys from everyone else. I think they both have this ceiling of getting upwards of 2.5 blocks in a game. I do like the situation of the Oklahoma City Thunder better than the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs probably not going to be a great team, out the gate. So they're probably going to handle Victor Wembanyama a little bit cautiously. Whereas Chet Holmgren, I mean, I feel like Oklahoma City Thunder could easily be a playoff team with the roster that they've assembled. Him playing power forward with so many dynamic talents around him that all are, Josh Giddey and SGA and Jalen Williams, all that offer huge fantasy upside. Adding Chet into that fold, oh man, that's even better. So I think efficiency-wise, I actually lean towards Chet having a better season. But, ultimately, I'm not gonna be mad at Victor Wembanyama. I just don't like the price. I'll wait rounds, maybe 1 or 2 rounds for Chet Holmgren.
I can say that. Now, the thing that I would argue against this is that, yes, what they can do is similar, right? I don't think there's any problem with that. And Chet's rim protection instincts are unbelievable. He's not as big as Wembanyama. He's still big, but his rim protection instincts are unbelievable. But if we're going to look at pure upside, now I am really, outside of an injury, right, which, again, I can't predict, I think Chet's going to play more games than Wembanyama, so he's got that advantage. And I think if the Thunder aren't a playoff team this season, I think that'd be a relative disappointment, even though the West is relatively strong and even, they're going to be that good. But I would say, the two things I'd say, if I was to ask you a question, which one of these two guys, Wembanyama or Chet Holmgren, has a better chance, not a high chance, but a better chance of averaging 20 points per game or a better chance of averaging 3 blocks per game, I, without hesitation, say it's Wembanyama. I don't think Chet can get there, but I do think that Chet might shoot 52% and Wemby might go 46% from the field, or Wemby might be 17 points and Chet might be 15, but on better efficiency. But that overall... yeah, if Vic got 20 and 9 with 2.9 blocks, fine, I believe it. If you just say Chet got that, I say that's not true. I don't think he can get to that level quite there yet. Would you agree, disagree with that?
Yeah, I would say that I agree with it, certainly on the scoring side of things. The questions I have for both of them is the rebounding. I see both of their rebounding similarly, like around 8.5 rebounds. But you're right. I think it is, if you're looking at pure ceiling, it's definitely with Wembanyama. And, you know, with so much usage probably going to him, very interesting San Antonio lineup where he's going to be the focal point of the offense, whereas Chet is probably going to be fourth option. So, yeah, I think if you're looking for the scoring, Victor certainly has the upside. But I think you can build a really compelling team around Chet Holmgren as well, just being that he can give you that 2.5, maybe even 3 block potential.
Chet might be the 5th offensive option if Midwest Dylan Brooks Lou Dort has anything to say about it. But we will see. We'll see how that goes. We're going to talk.
Do we believe that? Do we believe that after Kason Wallace?
Yeah. Well, hey, if it was me, Wallace would be starting absolutely day one. But there's almost no chance that's going to happen. But Dort. We're going to talk Thunder and Spurs. Dort and Keldon Johnson will be out of those teams absolutely immediately. Get me something else and let's build a proper team that makes sense. And I know people are going to think, you're just a hater, Josh. You hate Keldon. You hate Lou Dort. They're actually good players. Not really. They're 6 men on good teams. But that's not really what the point of this is. We're going to get to my first takeaway in a second. Before we do that, though, I'm going to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy, but it's not daily fantasy where you're assembling a lineup with salaries or going up against thousands of blokes with convoluted spreadsheets. It's you, mano a mano, or womano a womano, against player projections, points, rebounds, assists, threes, steals, blocks, fantasy points. You look at them and you go, oh, that one looks like it's low. Let's choose more. Or that one looks like high. Let's go under. You do 2 to 6 of those. You get up to 25 times your entry fee back if you hit all 6 of those right. And it's easy. You can do it in under 60 seconds. It's available in over 30 US states, majority of Canadian provinces and territories as well. And it's not just the NBA. You can do baseball on right now. Pretty sure they're going to have the Women's World Cup going as well, which has started here in Australia today after a good win by Australia last night. But whatever sport you're looking for, MMA, boxing, golf, tennis, it's all there on PrizePicks. So download the PrizePicks app. Simple. Because we've got a special offer for you. So download the PrizePicks app. If my ad read would actually work, as the screen is frozen. So this is just great stuff for PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com. That's better. Sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. If you put in $100, guess what? They give you $100 back. If it's $50, they'll give you $50. If you decide to deposit $72.50, I'm pretty sure they'll give you $72.50 back. So don't forget, enter that promo code LOCKEDON to sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right. It's time for my first takeaway, Dan, and that is that Overtime Elite, and as I've tried to be really sports-centery there with that headline, or pardon the interruption maybe, OTE is A-OK. There was so much concern about, the guys from Overtime Elite, mate, they're playing 16-year-olds. Of course they'll be able to beat up on them. That's bloody, they're terrible opponents. And my point of that was, okay, fine. They are playing against some young guys. They're also playing against some older guys, but we saw them play against professional teams, and the production from the Thompsons, but also the guys like Gortman and Martin and those sort of players, and even the year before with Jean Montero and Dominic Barlow, they look good. And when they played pro international teams, they did exactly the same thing. And then they came out, a man and a Sar, but even Jalen Martin and Jazin Gortman, they just did what they needed to do. And that, it's really interesting, we'll talk about this in a second, that Overtime Elite pathway is changing completely now. But the teams that overthought it, and there weren't many because Amen went 4 and Asar went 5, but there was so much skepticism about this program and about this overtime elite situation. I think that as soon as a man got the ball in the first game against Portland, I think a lot of those concerns went out the window and they went, oh, yeah, nah, he's actually pretty good. Something's happened, Dan. Your sound has disappeared. You forgot to unmute.
Over here.
There we go.
No,
He's
how
back.
could I not? Yeah, dude, the crowd was electric when Amen was going to the, and like his ability to finish with the left hand was something that I didn't expect. But size of the ball, both of these guys are exceptional, and I'm like, we'll get to my second takeaway in a bit, but he's got to get on the court because the size advantage that he has, he showed a competent jump shot. He got to the rim and downhill very quickly with ease. Sure, there's going to be some kind of catch up that he's going to have to play to get, more used to playing physical style basketball, the NBA. But I think we can confidently say that overtime elite is just fine. And these guys are going to be really interesting basketball prospects, development projects that hopefully could see some fantasy impacts this season. I'm hoping so.
I'm not even sure they're that developmental, to be honest. What they did straight away just looked exactly like anyone coming out of college did, and better than any of those guys. Like, Amen hurt his ankle blocking a 7'2" center Ibu Baji at the rim. Like, he got up that high and just blocked him. It was like, okay, what are we doing here? The athleticism translates. It doesn't matter who you're playing against. Yeah, the shooting is going to be a problem at times. They shot okay, but it was the feel, the passing, the vision, the defense, defensive playmaking, blocks and steals both guys were getting. You're right about playing time. That's more about, and we're going to get to the Houston side of that in a second, but even like Dominic Barlow, like how good was he playing for the Spurs? He's still not signed somehow. I don't know how a team hasn't brought him back. Surely the Spurs are bringing him back, and they should be looking at him as a backup center, although Charles Bassey's still there recovering from that knee injury, but Barlow's a good player too. And what I said before about the overtime elite pathway, hey, we're not going to have to worry about this because they're changing their entire model now. They're not offering professional contracts anymore. What they're doing is becoming more like a prep school type of situation where the guys come in 16, 17, they do schoolwork for 4 hours a day or whatever it is, 3 hours a day, then they do a lot of basketball stuff, enough to get them enough credits to be able to go into college. And they've got someone from their program going to Stanford this year. There's someone one or two players going to G League Ignite this year, and someone, Alex Sarr, coming down to the NBL this season as well. But they're not doing the professional contract thing anymore where you play there and then you're able to get drafted. They're doing the preparation for the G League Ignite, NBL, Europe, or college. That's what their system is now. So all of this evaluation stuff that we're trying to look at, how do these overtime elite guys translate, it's really not going to matter anymore because all the guys coming out of overtime elite are going to go through a separate pathway before they actually enter the NBA. So all of this stuff is really positive, but it's not actually going to matter for us as we move forward, which is a bit of a pain in the ass, but at least it showed that these guys were good and we've got a solid base to work with. Now that does transition into your second point, and that is about the Houston Rockets, who have a fantasy problem. Expand on that.
The problem I see, and we were talking about it a lot at Summer League, was like, who's going to start at the power forward spot for the Houston Rockets? And, in talking to the beat writers, it sounded like there's only a couple, we'll give it a few spots that are already secured in the starting lineup, right? You got Van Vliet, who just got paid a lot of money guard. Dylan Brooks made a ton of money as well, $20 million a year for the next 4 guaranteed. And then it's going to probably be a bit of a question mark. Jalen Green, he looks like he might have the edge, but Kevin Porter Jr. was doing all the things to kiss Udoka's ass early in the signing. So the pressers, and he's been doing everything, seemingly in the background to look like he's getting his good graces there. But the power forward spot, I think Tari Eason made a very competitive statement at Summer League. He averaged over 3.5 points. He hit threes, and a half a game. That's the level of production that we never saw from him because he's always this defensive hustle guy. But now that he's expanded that offensive game, he was taking like 20 shots a game. If he has the confidence, man, I think that's the type of defensive effort and like pairing him with Dylan Brooks, that's actually a very good, strong tenacity like defense. Whereas Jabari Smith, I don't know that you get that level of defense. Right. But, he also showed up and understood the assignment. I mean, he averaged 33.5 points in Summer League. So 35.5 points, excuse me. He just looked like he was ready to play and he looked confident. And that was a guy that was way confident than the 190th place finish that he had last year. Now, he did play better towards the end of the season, started to pick it up, but I think we still need to see a little bit more from him defensively before I'm going to overdraft him in fantasy.
Now, often when I'm sure you're aware of this, Dan, but when things get put into social media, things get taken out of context all the time or read into. Now, at halftime of that first game, Houston and Portland, this is after we had spoken to Houston guys and we had this discussion about what positions are up for grabs. And they said, look, it's not set that Green will start over Porter. He's got a huge edge. And it's also not set that Jabari Smith would start over Tari Eason, even though he does have a huge edge, right? He said it would, when we talked to the guys, I said it would take something pretty big for Eason to unseat Jabari Smith in the first half of that game happened. And Smith was atrocious. He was absent. He was passive. He couldn't shoot. And Eason was everywhere. And I leant over and I said to the Rockets guy I was talking to, I said, is this the sort of thing you mean by it's going to take something big for him to be unseated? And I tweeted out, I go, man, Jabari Smith looks uninterested. Tari Eason looks great. Is there a chance that he could start? And then, of course, Jabari Smith blew up. You're a dickhead. You said that Eason was going to start. I didn't. I said, is there a chance? Because look at how these guys are going. Now, of course, Jabari Smith went crazy after that, but his first half was terrible. And I think the big numbers from Smith and the highlight plays, the shit talking to James Wiseman, the buzzer beater game winner in that game, it's great, and he was awesome, but it also overshadows the fact that Tari Eason was unbelievable in that playing time as well. So I still don't know what's going to happen. And what it makes me feel a little bit, Dan, is that Eason played so well. Smith looked awesome too. Is there a chance that we get to a situation where we get Eason at the 4, Smith at the 5, and that limits what Şengün can do maybe?
That's interesting. I feel like Şengün is probably pretty solid. And we haven't really seen that Ime Udoka was talking about bolstering that front court. Didn't land Brook Lopez. So I feel like his job security is probably good right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see Jabari Moore at center and possibly getting that lineup together. That's really interesting. But then, this goes to a bigger problem. We just talked about Amen Thompson. Like, where does he fit into this equation when you also have Kevin Porter Jr.? Like, there's just so much talent and depth on this Rockets team. I'm like, it's great problems to have in real life basketball. Like, I think the Houston Rockets are definitely going to be better this season. But from a fantasy perspective, it's a headache. Like, I don't.
Look, Amen's going to get overdrafted, right? I feel confident about that because, again, when we talk to the Rockets guys, like, look, the plan for him is to come really slow. This is before game 1. To come along really slowly, maybe 15 minutes a night, back up point guard. And I was just, fuck, that's really low, like, for a top 4 pick. And then I watched that game and I go, mate, I don't know how long it's going to last where you're going to be able to play him 15 minutes a night. Like, could be better than Kevin Porter by the 1st of November. I don't know how that's all going to work out, but there is no clear-cut starting spot for Amen Thompson. There is no clear-cut 27-minute-a-night role for Amen Thompson, much like there's no 27-minute-a-night clear-cut role for Tari Eason at this point, nor is there for Kevin Porter. But there are 8 guys, Van Vliet, Green, Brooks, Smith, Şengün, Porter, Thompson, and Eason, who could all conceivably be top 100 players in the right scenario. And we're not even, like, is Cam Whitmore even going to play more than 10 minutes a night? I don't think he is, because they still love Jayshawn Tate as well. So where the hell are they going to run an actual backup center? Is Landale going to play, or is Smith going to get that? Like, because where does Whitmore play? So I don't know. You're right. It is a weird team. The development stuff with some of these young guys. How do they get the minutes? You're going to have Porter, Thompson, Eason, who would all start for quite a few, not every team, but for quite a few teams, they would get starting roles, and they're going to be in limited roles. It's going to be really, really interesting.
It really is. I think right now, in my initial rankings, I had Tari Eason slotted somewhere in that 100 range. That's factoring in that he's going to get at least 25 minutes. I think that he can at least get a pretty consistent behind Dillon Brooks and Jabari Smith if that ends up being their construction. But Jabari, I have right around that area too, because I just don't know what version we're going to get of him. We're going to get Summer League standout, or are we going to get, progress back to, I don't know how I'm feeling being the number 3 pick with all this pressure to perform, and, he kind of just chokes under pressure. So I think I'm going to kind of bunch them all in. The one question I have is, like, Jalen Green, where are you ranking? Because last year I was completely off. I thought he was going to be, his stat proved, counting stat-wise, but the efficiency in the numbers are still, and the lack of, defensive metrics really hurt his value. So how much are you moving him up as a result of all these changing dynamics?
Oh, this team's going to be really hard. I haven't sit down and projected them yet, but it's going to be really hard to figure out. Another team that's going to be hard because they do have talent, but they've also got one of the weirdest front offices in the NBA. That is the Detroit Pistons. I don't know what Las Vegas resident Troy Weaver is going to be deciding here, but they started Duren and Wiseman together in Summer League. There's whispers around that they might continue to do that. I don't know how they do it. And following on from the overtime elite stuff, I don't think there's any shot that Asar Thompson will start. He should, but they seem committed to either starting Isaiah Stewart and Duren, or heaven forbid Isaiah Stewart and Wiseman, or even further heaven forbid Duren and Wiseman together with Bogdanovic in there as a shooter. Like, Bogdanovic is not coming off the bench until he is traded. That's just not going to happen. So what are they going to do? But watching those games, now, I don't know if you have the same opinion as me, but Duren was so much better than James Wiseman. Wiseman put up some okay numbers, but he's bad. He's still bad. And for me to say that he is a worse player than Marvin Bagley says a lot, because he's bad. Like, how badly did you watch? I don't know if you watched that game with me, the Pistons Rockets game where Wiseman was getting cooked by Jabari Smith every time down, and Smith was basically like, get me the ball, I'm on Wiseman, he's got no chance. He's just shit talking him every single time. When he dropped like 40 or whatever it was in that game in 3 quarters, when he went crazy. Wiseman was terrible defensively, he wasn't good offensively, he mucks up all the spacing, whereas Jalen Duren is doing through the leg crossover dribbles, he's passing, he's setting up offense. Like, he hit threes. I didn't know where that came from. And it was very clear to me that Duren is the center of the future, is the best player there. But I do not trust this organization for a single second to do the right thing with that. And I am even though Monty Williams is a different coach to Dwayne Casey, I am still very, very scared about what they're going to do, even though it seems really obvious what the answer is.
Yeah, I think the game that you're referring to, I think I was definitely there. Was that the game that Jabari Smith had 6 assists too?
Yeah,
He was just doing everything, I think, that game against Wiseman. And I happened to be playing craps at like 4:00 in the morning with a close family member of James Wiseman.
Oh, no.
And apparently he's very happy in Detroit and he loves the situation. However, so that's what kind of says me. Like, I feel like the front office and everybody's all aligned. However, the eye test, it screams Jalen Duren is better. The thing I do wonder about, though, is like with Monty Williams there, I feel like James Wiseman is more of a DeAndre Ayton than Jalen Duren would be. Like, I feel like I'm just talking about the optics around how he left Golden State, didn't like his role, wanted the ball more, like all those kind of, ancillary type of things that goes on in the background. I think Jalen Duren is he doesn't need usage and plays run through him to succeed, right? Like, he's a rebounder, he's a protector, he's a rim runner. You're looking at a low end double with some block potential. Like, I'm okay with that, and I'd much rather prefer that in fantasy than whatever mystery we're going to get with James Wiseman, because we haven't really seen him be consistent and sustain that performance over a period of time because he hasn't really had a chance to. But this fit is clunky, and I think the size that Detroit has, I think Cade Cunningham would be much more beneficial with a rim runner like Duren than throw it into the post and back down jump hooks from James Wiseman.
This is Wiseman's 4th season. Now, I know he hasn't played a ton of games, but when you've been in an NBA program for 3 years, like, you need to absolutely stand out. Like, Lester Quinones was in his 2nd year and he just dominated, and no one's ever heard of Lester Quinones. And James Wiseman was out there looking like he was the 17th pick in the 2023 draft with his performances. He just looked fine. Like, he looked all right, but he didn't dominate it. And you're in year 4, mate. Like, you've been around NBA teams for this long. He's not very good, but I worry that they've given this extension to Isaiah Stewart. I worry they're going to extend James Wiseman now on his rookie deal as well. And I would just be starting Asar Thompson at the 3 and Bogdanovic at the 4. But there's almost no way that's going to happen. So while I say Duren is better than Wiseman, this is a real-life take from watching them. I don't know what they're going to do, and I'm really worried that there's going to be shenanigans afoot in Detroit. But let's go to Utah, and let's talk about the speaker himself, Keontae George. Dan, he was picked at pick 16. You've told me that he is a steal. Is he the steal of the draft? I've got someone else who's the steal of the draft. But he's a steal. So tell us about what you saw from Keontae.
It was more so of the versatility that he had, as a scorer. The ability to stretch the floor. I mean, he was knocking down 6 threes in multiple games. The distribution, the way that he's finding Ochai Agbaji just very easily, another player that looked great. Really excited about him. I think he could see some minutes, hopefully by Clarkson. But I think it's more of the future that I'm more excited about with Keontae George. Certainly a capable ball handler, eyes a wet shot. But I think it's the situation around Utah that I'm more excited about. So Taylor Horton-Tucker on an expiring contract, he opted into his player option. So did Jordan Clarkson. If they're both, if Utah's in a certain situation by mid-season that they're not happy, or maybe that they can find some value to get those guys to a contending team that might be able to vie for a championship or something. I mean, Keontae George is definitely going to be a fantasy. He's going to have a fantasy impact in year 1. And the other player, Colin Sexton, ugly deal, but he's been on the trade block for a while now. So I think Utah has plenty of pieces. I think that they've understood, this guy was a first team all summer league, sustained an ankle injury that, potentially set him back a little bit. But I mean, I think we saw enough from him to prove that, going 16th in the draft, I think that was what he was. he fell way too far for the talent that he presents and teamed up with someone like Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, etc.
I spoke about him on my rookie ranking show yesterday. I was out on him. Looks like I was wrong on that at this early stage because he was overweight at Baylor. He had an ankle injury. He was inefficient, but he looked great losing that weight and putting up some really good numbers. Now, with the Clarkson thing, Clarkson did opt in, but he also extended. So I'm not even sure he's trade eligible, but he's extended another 2 years on his contract. But you're right about Horton Tucker. But also, I tweeted this out, I don't even know, a week or two ago. It was while I was sitting at the pool. And I tweeted this out and I said, out of the rookies, there's not that many that are a chance or even a lock to start opening night. And I think it's Wemby. Yes, he'll start. Not including Chet. I think Brandon Miller probably will, but that's not even a guarantee. That would mean that one of Miles Bridges or Gordon Hayward plays off the bench, so that's not a guarantee there either. And then I think maybe George is the next one because Scoot might not start. We're going to get to Lillard in a second. Scoot might not start opening night. So George has a real chance of unseating Colin Sexton, who's not good. He's not overpaid. He's not a great contract, but he's less than $20 million a year. I think he's at $16 million a year. It's not a huge contract. That is okay if you wanted to use him as a combo guard sort of a contract. But with the way that George, and I don't think he will, but out of everyone else, he's got more of a chance of starting than Amen Thompson or Asad Thompson or Anthony Black or Taylor Hendricks or any of these guys. Jarris Walker's maybe got a chance to start. Even Obi Toppin probably 50-50. But there's not that many of these guys who have a chance to start. And I could easily make the argument that, Keontae should start over Colin Sexton because you're not getting anywhere with Sexton as your starting point guard. George might be that guy, but let's find out. Let's see where we're going with this team. And I think that it's worth them exploring. He was great. My steal of the draft is Leonard Miller. I don't know how he fell to 33. We watched him in person in that first game against the Pelicans. It was the first game we watched. He looked unbelievable in that game. It looked way too easy for him in his first half of Summer League basketball. And I don't understand at all how he fell number 33. But Keontae is probably right behind him in terms of steals of the draft. Now, let's move away from rookies because, as I said, we were around and talking to a lot of media people. So we heard a lot of stuff about Damian Lillard. And we talked to quite a few Portland people while we were there. And one of the main takeaways that I got from that was that this is no guarantee to happen anytime soon. That was the takeaway that I got. And we heard from multiple Portland people, Dan, that a Damian Lillard trade may push all the way through August, all the way through September, all the way through the beginning of the regular season. And if the regular season starts, the belief from these people, now they were Portland people, so maybe there's a little rose garden colored glasses happening here. They said, but if that happens, Dame is Dame and he will come and he will play, much like Kevin Durant did last season with Brooklyn. Because they said the offer that is being tabled by Miami, if Joe Cronin accepts that, he will be fired. And he knows he will be fired. So this means that ownership is completely on board with what Cronin is doing because they're saying, look, do not accept this deal because you will be fired if you do this. This is the end of your career if you trade him for this package. That we heard that from multiple people. And look, unless something dramatically, they said this is ground to a halt. They're not really even talking a huge amount between the two teams because the offer's not there. So while we all expect Dame to go to Miami, we've seen many times. Remember Paul George was going to the Lakers or Kawhi was getting traded to the Lakers or getting traded to LA and they went to OKC and went to Toronto and played their 1 or 2 seasons there respectively. And then, they found their way to those teams eventually. And it is a different situation. Lillard's longer, but there's no guarantee that this happens soon, or happens at all. It might happen at the trade deadline. But the overwhelming response from multiple people we heard, Dan, was if they do this trade, Cronin will be fired and he doesn't want to get fired. So how do we deal with this for fantasy?
Yeah, I feel like it just devalues Scoot a little bit more. I think Anthony Simons is probably about the same. So is Jeremy Grant. I'm still expecting him to be a top 70 player, no matter who the point guard is. But yeah, even Dame, I don't know, that he would play disgruntled because he's still getting paid and eventually he's going to fish his wish, right? So, he's still probably a late first round pick, but to expect him to have the season that he did last year, that's not happening. Especially with Scoot Henderson there, who I saw in the one game that we watched him look like he had all the tools of being a franchise cornerstone point guard. So I think that Portland's just going to be playing the waiting game. They're still going to get Scoot some minutes. I think it's going to devalue him initially, but certainly a player that I would probably wanting to target or look into trading for probably around January, maybe a little bit before the trade deadline actually hits in February, because his fantasy value towards the end of the season could be huge when Damian Lillard's out of there.
we all, from a fantasy perspective, just want this to be done. Either way, either say it's not happening or it's happening, so we understand where it's going, because at the moment we're in limbo, and I think a lot of people are just expecting it to go down any day, but I'm not. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to drag through to September at least, if not further, and that's annoying for us, because the other thing...
look at some of these offers. Players are just terrible value, so they're going to have multiple teams involved to make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
This is a long ways away.
And the thing with it also with Lillard is that if he is in Portland, then he probably can do the same stuff as last year. But if he goes to Miami, he probably can't. So where do you value him? Is he 9th or 10th or 18th? How does it change if he goes to Miami? It's probably fine, but then you have to... How's the valuation sit on Butler? How does the valuation sit on Adebayo when we just don't know what's going to happen? Or what if then we discount Adebayo and Jimmy because we think Dame's going there, and then Dame doesn't go there, and then those guys' value stays what it is, or it's actually increased because they've lost Strus and Vincent in the process as well, and their team has lost a bunch of talent and hasn't really replaced it because they're waiting on this trade to happen, which I feel like they sort of did last year as well when they let PJ Tucker go because they were assuming they were trading for Kevin Durant. And they didn't, and they were stuck playing Caleb Martin at power forward. Yes, it worked out towards the end of the season, but they had to resort to getting Kevin Love in because they didn't have a power forward in that position. So, I don't know, there's just a lot that's still up in the air with that, and I just didn't expect when I was talking to those Portland guys, I said, come over, let's talk some Blazers with these guys, Dan. And I didn't expect them to say, no, look, it's not happening, and Dame will come back and play, and don't be surprised when it goes into the season, because I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah, that was way longer than I expected, especially just given the magnitude of, the stature of Damian Lillard, and it seems like some of these deals just always happen. And I was, wondering if, Summer League, the environment where these executives are getting together, they're having these dinners to have these conversations to get things done. But this is going to go well beyond that. It's as complicated it really is. And, if I'm looking at it from a fantasy perspective for Miami, I'll probably be fading most Miami players just because I don't want Damian Lillard to be inserted in that situation because it's going to devalue everyone that's there. Bam Adebayo was a guy that I was very interested in once Kyle Lowry came because I thought his assists would go up. They actually didn't go up at all. And, that was the leap that he didn't take that he could have. He showed a lot of promise, at least. And Jimmy Butler last season was playing, I think, his ceiling. I'm not expecting him to do that again. So I'm probably going to devalue him anyway, just for that fact. Improbable run by the Miami Heat. But, I don't know. Maybe dating Shakira might give him a little bit more of a boost to sustain that top 12 finish last year, but maybe I'm gonna put him back 20s.
Maybe he can do some conjugal visits when she goes to jail for tax evasion, as I read sometime this morning. But that's enough Shakira talk, and that's enough Summer League talk from us, Dan. Thank you for coming on. It was great to meet you in person in Las Vegas in the heat of the Devil's Arsehole as we were there, and enjoying really just a fantastic environment, seeing a lot of young players and hearing a lot of interesting stuff from people around the NBA. Tell people what you've got going, your myriad of media enterprises that are happening for you, and where people can find you.
Yeah, I'm going to be working with check out NBC Sports Edge. They're going to be doing Round Ball Stew, Raphael Johnson and myself. Be sure to be on lookout for that. We got some industry mock drafts coming out, so I'm sure we'll both be participating in those. My rankings should be dropping very early. I'll say within the next couple of weeks. So the Yahoo fantasy basketball, app is going to be opening up. So if you guys want to do some early drafting, you can find my rankings there, and then follow me on Twitter at Dan Titus. And Josh, great meeting you as well, man. Great experience, and hope to definitely do it again. I know it may not be next year, but I know I'll see you soon. Absolutely, man. Thank you again for coming on. Go check out Dan's stuff. Dan, thank you once more. Yes, sir. And that's it. Follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. And if you are here on YouTube, thumb it up and leave those comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.